archaeology and ecology in future. It's a matter of great happiness that renowned teachers, researchers, and students from various universities of USA, UK, France, Germany, Ireland, England, Finland, Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, and officials from various GEO-NGO departments like CEGIS, Department of Environment, Department of Archaeology, Uttaran, Rupantar, take part in the webinar series. Within these 8 papers, we share a new experience on the archaeologies of Deltic ecology. With these few words, I would like to conclude the closing ceremony as with the permission of our chief guest and our chair. Sir, can we? Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Dear audience, today we have with us Professor Shadhin Sen from Jahangirnagar University, Bangladesh, and Mr. AKM Syfur Rahman, Regional Director, Department of Archaeology, Bangladesh, as a keynote speaker. Now, I would like to say a few words about them. Though maximum of us, we know Professor Shadhin, but it's the matter of webinar etiquettes or webinar netiquettes that we had to say something about him. Professor Dr. Shadhin Sen is the professor of the Department of Archaeology at the University of Jahangirnagar, Bangladesh. Professor Dr. Shadhin Sen has obtained BA in Archaeology and MA in Archaeology from Department of Archaeology, Jahangirnagar University. He has done his PhD from Department of Archaeology, Jahangirnagar University in 2014 under a co-directed program between University of Lyon to France and Jahangirnagar University. Currently, he is conducting studies under a project on paleoecology of Bengal and on structures and processes of heritage production, as well as on full coverage surveying, geoarchaeology, and excavation in northwestern part of Bangladesh. He is interested in field archaeology, geoarchaeology, critical heritage studies, public archaeology, and landscape archaeology. There is so more, but I had to conclude it now here. Short biography of AKM Syfur Rahman. AKM Syfur Rahman is the Regional Director of the Department of Archaeology, Ministry of Cultural Affairs, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. Syfur Rahman has obtained his BSS in Archaeology and MSS in Archaeology from Department of Archaeology, Jahangirnagar University. For last 7 years, he has conducted several archaeological excavation and exploration in this Deltic region, while he was the Assistant Director of the Regional Office, Khulna and Barishal Division. He has interest in the field of archaeology, geoarchaeology, public archaeology, landscape archaeology, and heritage management. Today, as a moderator and discussant, we have with us Professor Dr. Kathleen D. Morrison. I would like to give a short brief on Professor Kathleen D. Morrison. Professor Dr. Kathleen D. Morrison is the Sally and Alvin V. Shoemaker Professor of Anthropology and Department Chair at the University of Pennsylvania. She is the author or editor of several volumes, including The Rosie Valley, Landscape History, Place and the Making of a Dryland Reservoir System. She did her PhD on Anthropology, University of California, Berkeley at 1972. Her research focuses on the historical ecology of Southern Asia, especially changes in agriculture, land use, and environment, integrating approaches from archaeology, history, and environmental science. Her current project includes work on the long-term relationships between biodiversity and human land use, land coverage, a biodata project using archaeological, historical, and paleo-environmental evidence to improve climate models, network and spatial analysis of middle period South Indian inscriptions and archaeological sites, ongoing work on the archaeology of farming, food, and power relations in South India from the Neolithic to the early modern period. In the field of research, she is interested in South Asia, historical anthropology, colonialism, and imperialism, archaeological method and theory, agricultural landscape history, political ecology, water and irrigation, pollen analysis, stable isotope analysis, anthropology of food, conservation and heritage biodiversity. Before I gave the microphone to Professor Kathleen D. Morrison, I'd like to share some ground rules of the webinar to all of you. Please mute your microphone while the webinar presentation and moderation is going on. If you have any question or comments regarding the session, please write it down in the chat box or question answer box. We will take your question and pass it to the speaker or moderator. The session will be recorded with permission of the keynote speakers. Now, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Kathleen D. Morrison to moderate the session. Professor Kathleen D. Morrison.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Let me just, before we start the talk, which is I know what you really want to hear, just thank the organizers very much for the opportunity to be here and to engage with this very important region. I last saw some of you in person in Kolkata many years ago, and I'm still hoping to cross the border and meet you in Bangladesh someday. So very good. So, you know, finally, also, let me just wish a happy 50th birthday to the People's Republic of Bangladesh. Now, I'm a little bit older than Bangladesh itself. So I'll say at midlife, I got my PhD in 1992, though not 1972. So I'm not quite that old. But at midlife, I think, you know, we all take a little bit of a stock in our lives. We look forward, we look back, and we think about how our past has been and how it might shape our future. And I think that this series is a really exemplary of this. So without further ado, I know that you want to hear the lecture. So let me invite the speakers to go ahead and begin.
Hello, Kathleen.
Hello, great to see you.
Okay, nice to see you too. So I would like to thank the organizers and all the eminent speakers and panelists today. And throughout the last, I think, 2 weeks, since 4th of June, we are listening to all of them. And I felt personally very honored and humbled by their presentation. And today, without thanking everybody right now, because it will be done by the host. I am just an honorary advisor to their effort in this landscape. I would like to go straight to our session, and I hope you will bear with us patiently because we may take a little bit more time than the usual, and you'll be sad to know that we are staying right now. I am staying in Khulna, and the surge of COVID pandemic is very bad condition here right now, and from the day after tomorrow there will be complete lockdown in this area. So there is also incessant rainfall and the connectivity issues. Therefore, I would like to ask your forgiveness if there is any technical errors or technical problems. We'll try to sort it out. So let me share my screen first. Kathleen, is it visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
But
is it
can you make it bigger?
Yeah.
I will go to the slide show.
That will be fine.
Okay, great.
So Our title is basically searching for the entangled land water leavings in the past and archaeological engagement with the Bengal Delta.
Shadhin, sorry to bother you. Can't read anything. Can you go to slideshow if it's possible?
Right. Can you see now?
I think you, sorry, Swadhin, I think you have it on speaker view, so we can see the slide that's coming up next. I don't think you want us to see that.
You need to switch to screens.
Slideshow mode.
Yes.
Right.
Now?
No, but you need to do the under display settings to switch to screens.
Right.
You're displaying the presenter view.
Right. You don't want presenter view.
Yeah, yeah.
You can use F5, then it will start.
You see where it says display settings up at the top? You
Yeah.
should be able to go up there and
Yeah.
change it. Wait.
I think it's slideshow
Okay.
across the top where it says, yeah, there you can be there, yeah. And then from beginning, yeah.
Right, now go up to the top, all the way, yeah, right there, display settings.
Swap presenter and slideshow.
Right. Yay, okay, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. So, okay, now it is visible, no, to everybody?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay,
Absolutely
okay.
fine.
Okay, thank you. So we just wanted to, as Dr. Bishnupriya Boshak in the concluding ceremony put it very nicely, that we wanted to idealize this webinar series because of our experiences throughout the last, I think, 20 years of working in this part, that is the active Deltic part of Bangladesh, as well as in the northwestern part, where we, along with our team, are working, I think, since 1998. And this presentation is more about the problems we are facing and the questions which are being dealt with. And you all know that throughout our research and with every research, finding answers to the questions can be very difficult, as sometimes you will face more questions than finding answers. Therefore, our aim will be to present selectively from the recent works of the Directorate of Archaeology, Khulna and Barishal Division here, and my co-speaker, AKM Syfur Rahman. He will share his work after my introduction and problematization. And then again, I will come back with some of the interpretations and some of the issues that are required to be attained and required to be engaged with significance and with much importance. And I would like to begin with this is, we call it in Bengal, this is called Bandana. Bandana is basically a form of, or a form of introduction, a form of paying tribute to, or a form of showing devotion to the human and non-human beings, and also the superhuman or supernatural beings around us in different traditions especially in the poetry tradition, especially in the singing tradition, especially in the narrative tradition of Bengal. And we were talking about, I think, during after the lecture of Dr. Vishnupriya Bosak, about the recent publication of Amitabh Ghosh's book Jungle Nama, which is a translation of one of the very popular narratives in this part of the Delta, which is known as popularly known as Bon Bibi Pala. That is, Bon Bibi is the goddess of the Bon, that is the forest, and Hindus worship her as Bonu Durga, and Gaji is perceived as a saint and or peer in Bengal, and he is popular character in different narrative form in Bengal, and especially in this part. And in Gaji's narrative, these narratives are performed, sung with specific dance and specific environment during the month of Chaitra and Boishak, that is during the month of March and April in Bangladesh. And this is from one of the narratives where we can see this Bandana part, or the paying tribute part, is just incorporating all the non-human and human beings. For example, the Bandana starts with paying tribute to the Himalayan mountains to the north at first. Then it is also mentioned that in the Himalayas there are no human settlement, and then comes the sun, or the goddess of sun, though we know that in mainstream Brahmanical narratives, sun is worshipped as a god, not as goddess. And then tributes are paid to the southern part, which is known as the Bay of Bengal, as well as the rivers. And there is also mention of the merchants on the sea, and they are referred to as the wise people, Sadhu Mahajan. And then they usually pay tribute to the Holy Mecca. Towards it, the Muslims pray and offer their prayer. And he is also asking for the just benevolence of the God or Allah, and also he's worshipping or paying tribute to the four directions. So this is a part that I want to begin with, and I want to add just paying tribute to one of the most eminent historians of this part of Bangladesh. Of course, when he was alive, it was before partition of 1947, and his name we had mentioned in, I think, in our discussions, and his name is Sri Satish Chandra Mitra. He was born in Khulna in 1872, and he died in 1931. So we are humbled, honored to dedicate our presentation to the fond memory of Satish Chandra Mitra. And you can see the first edition of the book of History of Jashore Khulna, which was the first volume was published in 1914, and the second volume was published in 1921. And on the right side, you will see the cursor is there, the map he prepared, and this map was published and included in that volume. And if you have any opportunity to read the introduction of the book, then you will find out that how he worked facing so many problems, including the financial problem at his time. So again, we are humbled, honored, and very happy to dedicate this presentation. And I know that this presentation comes not any closer to his work, the work he had done in the 1920s or the beginning of the 19th centuries. And this is two photographs I have taken from the Daily Prothom Alo, one of the most popular Bengali newspaper in Bangladesh. And our friends from Kolkata will be familiar with these photos because in that part of West Bengal, India also, recent tidal surge during or after the cyclone Yash had the same effect. So what do these images represent? These images particularly represent a part of Khulna district, which is known as Koira, and I will show some of the archaeological sites of Koira in the later part of my presentation, where people are together to build the embankment, which was just destroyed partially by the tidal surge during the cyclone. And interestingly, I can see from the newspaper reportings and all the talks in the social media that it was somehow perceived as a battle between man and the wild, or untamed nature versus human, which is very common in the mainstream modernist narrative of man, the culture nature narrative that we have already talked about in our earlier lectures. On the other hand, we can also see some of the issues we are talking about and some of the ideas of our relationship to the nature or the river or the water and all the natural processes which we call disaster in our part. For example, the cyclones, the floods, the tidal surge, so on. This is the issue of the role of community or role of society, which is increasingly diminishing with the intervention of the nation state and with the intervention of the organizations which are national as well as transnational. This community level engagement or community level perception of the river, water, flood, tide, and all the natural events in this part of the delta can be a very interesting way to engage with the past as well as engage with our present. We can also search for this meaning of community level engagement even during the colonial, pre-colonial period. But we are looking for that methodology. So this is the problematization, perspectives and questions I would like to refer to in a brief. That is, in this context of this webinar series, we wanted to initiate a dialogue among various disciplines and practices, as has been pointed out by Professor Michael Steckler and many other speakers and many other scholars also in this webinar series. I don't know how much we have succeed or how well we could manage to interact among each other. But this is the initiation, and I hope that we will try to present today's lecture on the basis of our understanding and knowledge from the earlier speakers too. And the past of the present of the Ganges Delta, but here I have deliberately used plural number for the past and also the present, because for me, time is interpretive, experiential, and also conceptual, and it is not just homogeneous. And it can be varied according to different intersections of communities, collectives, and individuals, and also on the basis of the context. So how do we conceptualize our knowledge and practice? The images that I have shown in the beginning of this lecture, that people are working together to just restore the embankment, can be a good point of departure. That the modern or contemporary understanding of the delta, the way we as archaeologists are doing, or the way art scientists are doing, or the way social scientists are doing, is that enough? And I think the pandemic has already conditioned some of the questions that were not asked before. And we can talk about many of the thinkers who have written, who have talked, and who have raised different issues regarding our perception and regarding our conceptualization of dominant knowledge and normalized knowledge. I may refer to many of them. For example, Dipesh Chakraborty to Ashile Mbembe, from Giorgio Agamben to Partho Chatterjee. Many people are talking about the rethinking of the way we relate as human beings to our landscape, our river, our ecosystem, and all the other people, and how the things can be global as well as local. So this pandemic has brought a very important moment of all of our life to rethink the way we practice our discipline as academicians, the way we work in the field or in the home as intellectuals, or as activists, or as people who are trying to engage with the society, engage with the cultures, engage with the time and varied aspects of time. And I mentioned earlier that in Bangladesh, the involvement of transnational agencies and involvement of the non-government agencies in delta managements, in flood managements, and in salinity managements, and in community level management, for example, in sanitation, in other aspects of life, is very important and significant. And how do they perceive? How the anthropologists working in Bangladesh, they perceive this delta, or this tidal part of the active delta, or how art scientists or geologists in Bangladesh and other parts of the world perceive this delta. How do we, as archaeologists, as historians, engage with this delta? And whether these perceptions are enough to look for some of the issues which is related to rethinking of the human, non-human interactions in the past. Can some of the aspects which can be identified from, for example, if I take from Professor Carol Cramley's work, that ethnoecological data, can we go beyond certain moments in time in the past and interpret or reconstruct and reinterpret many of the aspects as an archaeologist? Because as archaeologists, we have a very significant limitation, because archaeology is essentially anthropocentric. And we all know that there is a impeding and very important critique of anthropocentrism also in archaeology, especially from our colleagues and friends and scholars from Stanford School and some of the schools from Europe. They are also trying to locate archaeology in a domain which is beyond anthropology, anthropocentrism. But in Bangladesh, when we try to locate ourselves and engage with this anthropocentrism in archaeology, we are not in a very comfortable situation, because we cannot go beyond colonial period to look for a rethinking of the past, rethinking of the human, non-human relationship. It is very difficult because of certain dominant practices and dominant concept. For example, there is a question of scale, both spatial and temporal scale. And we were talking about it after Professor Goodbraid's lecture and Professor Steckler's lecture. That's when geologists work with, for example, this is just a sketchy sketch to show the incoherences between the way art scientists work or deal with time, and archaeologists and historians deal with time. And there are also differences between the dealing of time between archaeologists and historians. I am not intending to delve into the theories and the concepts of time and so on. There are many literatures on that. Even in archaeology, there are many literatures regarding conception of time in archaeology. I am not going into that. I am talking from our experience that when we deal with past in Bangladesh, we have first issue of dealing with the temporality, because most of the geological works are particularly involved or particularly engaged in a larger temporal scale. They talk about Holocene, they talk about even early, mid to late Holocene, they talk about Pleistocene, and additionally, most of the works on the landscape and other geological aspects are more or less confined to larger spatial scale. For example, we use the term Bengal Delta, we use the term Ganges Basin. When we talk about or engage with even in the local scale, for example, we hardly find any work which deals with, for example, shift of the rivers on a historical scale. For example, 2000 or 3000, last 3000 years or 2000 years on century scale or decadal scale. Is it possible to make a chronological understanding of these events and processes, which is continuous, consistent, and perpetual in this part of the delta? We can find geological work on Brahmaputra or Tista River in the north. We can find some work on Ganges River, the part of Ganges River which we call Padda, or Meghna River. But these works are basically concentrating on the large rivers. What about the smaller rivers? With our experience in northwestern part of Bangladesh, we have found that smaller rivers, tributaries, distributaries have had a very important role to play in the human occupation, the change and agricultural change in the agricultural system, even in the past water management. And in this part of the active delta, we are facing the similar situation that when we think about smaller rivers, not the Ganges River, if we talk about, for example, Betravati River in this part, or if we talk about Ichamoti River in this part, if we talk about Kapotakho River in this part, if we talk about Bhairab River in this part, we cannot find a very reliable method to identify the changes on a century scale during the last 2000 or 3000 years when we are finding the human presence in this part of the delta. This is the problem with the temporal and spatial scale when we deal with different disciplines, especially the discipline of geology and other disciplines of art sciences like sedimentology or geomorphology, even the contemporary disciplines of remote sensing and GIS. Therefore, the conception of chronology faces a problem on transdisciplinary domain. And moreover, I would like to add briefly that our perception of chronology in archaeology in South Asia, and most importantly in Bangladesh, have different kinds of problems. For example, we do not have access to chronometric dating. We often talk about absolute dating, but as far as I am concerned, or I know, that there is no method which can give us date in the past in absolute calendrical scale. Even the radiocarbon, for the radiocarbon dates, we need calibration, we need contextualization, we need careful association of radiocarbon dates with the context, and we have to engage with the archaeological stratigraphy and formation processes of archaeological records. We cannot simply date a particular deposit or layer or feature on the basis of a radiocarbon date of a particular sample from the same deposit, same feature, and same from the same event. So it is very difficult. First, we do not have access. We do not have that kind of financial and logistic capacities, as well as we have engrossed in, or we are included in a dominant tradition of practice where chronology, archaeological chronology is sought on a particular linear temporal frame, where we think typology and radiocarbon date can be correlated together in a simple way to find out the past events and processes. So there is a sign of blind reverence to scientific techniques. For example, not only radiocarbon dating, for example, like other scientific techniques which have been applied for archaeological sites. For example, there is a famous Buddhist monastery in northern part of Bengal, Bangladesh, which is a World Heritage Site, Shampura Mahabihara. There is a famous publication in one of the finest Journal of Archaeological Science, and they used soil micromorphology along with radiocarbon dates and XRD, X-ray diffraction analysis. And the conclusion was so annoying and so spurious that we had to find out that what was wrong with the method of analyzing all the samples from the site with such very contemporary techniques. Then we found out that the scholars who worked with the samples, they collected the samples from the reused, re-excavated or refilled trenches, which were dug for the restoration and conservation purpose. Therefore, even the radiocarbon dates were right, the interpretation went very wrong. And the interpretation, for example, was that during the occupation of the Shampur Mahabihar, it was a 0 degree centigrade temperature in that part of the region, which was completely absurd. And that particular paper was published in Journal of Archaeological Science. So if we do not think about the archaeological, in the archaeological domain, if we do not engage with the conceptual or the basics of the scientific techniques that we use for dating and for analysis, then the historicization of this data can conceal many of the events and processes in the past. Therefore, under these circumstances, how do we rethink the relationship between human and non-human being in the past? Is it really possible? Can we really do that? We are talking about rethinking the relationship. Can we go beyond certain periods and try to understand, for example, the pre-colonial perception of the rivers, pre-colonial perceptions of the processes or events? For example, I was reading Satish Chandra Mitra one day before. He was mentioning two proverbs very popular in this part of the delta. One in Bengali is that khal kete kumirana, or khal kete nona paniyana. That means that you are digging canals to bring saline water, or you are digging canals to bring crocodiles. And that proverb is particularly used to show that we can bring dangers to ourselves if we do not plan or manage things according to our context. So, and it was referred by Satish Chandra Mitra in reference to several such canal digging projects during the colonial period, when many of the rivers or the meanders of the rivers were cut and connected through channelization process by this canal digging. Therefore, when we think about this ethno-ecological data in this part of Bengal, we cannot go beyond certain periods of time. So can we go beyond those periods of time? Under these premises, I would like to request AKM Syfur Rahman to show summary of the three excavations which they have conducted, the Regional Directorate of Archaeology on this part, the Khulna Barishal Division have conducted over the recent years. And then I will come back to conclude some of our findings from the Deltic part as well as from the archaeological surveying. Syfur Rahman, please. I am stopping. Pauline?
Maybe he's out of network.
Mm.
Can't see him in the screen.
Pauline?
Okay, sir, let us make a phone call to him. AKM Syfur Rahman?
Yes. Sorry, network was gone. So thank you, moderator of the session, Professor Kathleen D. Morrison, and speaker, Professor Dr. Sadhin Sen. Good evening. I am AKM Syfur Rahman, and today I am going to present on preliminary data of a few excavated archaeological sites at southeastern part of Bangladesh. I have been worked in Regional Directorate Office, Department of Archaeology, Khulna and Barishal as Assistant Director, and have been conducted a few sites like Churichara Mount, Dalichara Mount, and Anjan's Posodpita. Is it okay? The presentation?
Yes, that looks good.
Thank you. So my presentation on preliminary data of few excavated archaeological sites at southwestern part of Bangladesh, and I'll present on 3 sites: Dalichara Mount, Churichara Mount, and residence of Khan Jahan, Muhammadullah Ali. The southeastern Deltic region of Bangladesh have
Mr.
ancient
Rahman,
settlements.
we can't hear him.
These are
Mm. You're cutting out. We can't hear you.
located between the Kapotaksha Bhairab is called Porton. Now is it okay?
Okay, now it's better.
Now it's okay?
It's better now, yes.
Okay. Now this is the map of the ancient settlements of southeastern Deltic region, archaeological sites, and we have excavated a few sites: Dalichara, Churichara, Bharatbhaina, Damda Piristan, residence of Khan Jahan's Mount, Baro Bazar, Kalupol Rajar Vita, from our Department of Archaeology government. And now I present about the 3 mount, the archaeological sites: Dalichara, Churichara, and residence of Khan Jahan. Dalichara Mount is located in Kashimpur village, Kourikhona Union, Keshapur Upazila, Joshore district. And this site is 10 kilometers from Kopil Muni and 2 kilometers from Bharat Bhaina and 18 kilometers from Damdam Piristan Mount. This is the map of southeastern part and encircled area where these three archaeological site is located. Dalidhara is located on the bank of a paleo channel to the south, and there is a river called Bhadra. It is on the east and north to the side. This is the paleo channel. Dalidhara is a structural mound, and it is almost oval shape, extended to the east and west. It measures 90 meter east-west and about 60 meter north and south. The top of the mound is 3.12 meter from the surrounding landscape and 8.12 meter above the main sea level. Initially, the excavated mound has been divided into 110 squares, and the excavations have been carried out in total 91 squares in 2 seasons. We have initially identified 6 periods, and 4 of these appear to be early medieval on the basis of foundations and archaeological findings. 2 other periods are medieval and late medieval. And the early medieval level 1 to 4, that belongs to medieval period, and the habitual deposits level 5 belongs to medieval period. This is the level 1, and here the topmost one is the brick soling of the courtyard belongs to level 4, and the downwards, the pottery and the brick fragments, this belongs to level 1, and a lot of potsherds, the pottery assemblies we have found as the earliest evidence of the occupation level of Dalidhara. These are the potteries. Most of the shards are bowl shaped. A few shards are hari and jars. This is the floor of level 1. This is the level of floor 1, and we found this inside the cell number 3, and under the structural remains of the monk's cell and the structural remains of the level 3. This is the carbonized rice we have found in level 2. The dotted area from where we collected carbonized rice, and we collected rice samples from 9 different places, and this area we have found the carbonized rice basically. This is the first location from where we found this carbonized rice. And there is a layer, a lot of samples from where we have been collected. This is the same location where we have collected the samples. This is another location. This is cell number 8, from where we also collected this carbonized rice samples. Here you can see the carbonized rice. And level 3, we got the structural remains, a temple and a stupa here, and 2 rectangular structures we have found over the carbonized rice level. and this level is under the level 4 of the Monastery of the Bihar. So this is the Bihara of later period, and these yellow structures belongs to level 3, and later these temple also used in level 4. This is the wall of a rectangular structure at south wing. Level 4. In level 4, we have found the structural remains of a Buddhist Bihara or the monastery, with the construction, reconstruction, and the use of earlier structures. This is an aerial image of the Talhijara site, and here you can see this is the cells, and this is the north wing, this is the western wing, these are the southern wing, and these are the monk cells. There is a entrance to the west with a projection, and this portion is the western wing, and we have found two shrines or temples with blind cells. And at this part, we got a apsidal-like structural remains. First, it seems like the apsidal chuita, and there are some earlier and later structures with this apsidal structures, and this is the courtyard, and at the center there is a central shrine with procession path, and we got another stupa under the base of this central shrine of tier 4. The Buddhist monastery is rectangular in shape, and 2 temples in the east, 9 monastic cells in the north, 9 in the south, and 6 in the west. In the middle of the west wing, there is a large room with the entrance hall. And in level 4, we have got 2 temples. This is the part of maybe the entrance of a temple. This is octagonal shape, but it is distracted by the local people. This is the rectangular structure, and this is the floor of Baranda at eastern wing with the temple. And there's a courtyard. Courtyard is 34.5 meter north-south and 40.6 meter in east-west. And there is a baranda which is running around the courtyard, as well as in front of the monk cells, north, south, west wings, and also at east wing of the temples. It measures 42 meters from north to south and 44.6 meters from east to west. The width is varying from 2.4 meters to 2.55 meters. This is the floor at east wing. There are some lime materials have been used, and it was very smooth at the top of this floor. This is the central shrine and the circumambulatory pathway. This is the central shrine of level 4 of the monastery of the Bihara, and there's another stupa that belongs to the earlier of this monastery or the Bihara. Here, this is the part of this stupa, and there is a deposit of filling, which is used for the base of the later period shrines of the Bihara, and partially they also used the earlier structural remains of the stupa at the base of this central shrine of later period. So this is the central shrine, and this is the wall, and this is the circumambulatory path. This is the soling of the courtyard. And we have found a few brick solings which is related to this level. And according to that, we are assuming that there were some construction, reconstruction, or repair has been conducted on that level. This is the apsidal or entrance of the temple at east wing. See, this is the preliminary data, and we just have been end our excavation in the last month. So these are the preliminary data. This is the apsidal-like structure, and we have found 2 fragments of terracotta plaques or sculptures from the both side of this apsidal, and the condition is so bad, and we have collected a few fragments and we cleaned this. You can see here, and rest of the part is cleaning by our team members. It's ongoing. This is the center portion of the apsidal-like structure. See, there is a stairway and a floor with white line, and this is maybe the earliest one. And later there is a wall has been joined with on the floor. This is the entrance, main entrance at west wing. And this is the entrance hall. These are the monk cells. These are the potteries are found at the west part of the outside of the just Bihara. Most of the potteries are bowl shaped. And there's monastic cells, cell 8, cell 9. This is entrance hall room, and this is number 7 and 6. This is the southern wing of the Bihara. This is cell number 432, and this is the veranda in front of the monk cells, and this is the back corridor of the monk cells. The exceptional and unique features of the monastery. The monastic cells are separated from each other by wide space with floor. In other viharas, monastic cells are usually separated from one another walls. There are no rooms in the southwest and northwest corner of this vihara. Instead, the range has ramped floor with brickwork or mud brick powders. There is a spacious porch or porch-like range on the backside of the monks' rooms, besides the veranda of the entrance of the rooms. These balconies are connected by the wide separate space of monastic cells and are also attached to the northwest and southwest corner floors. There are no monastic cells in the eastern wing of the vihara. There are 2 temples built on the cellular architecture. Another temple should be exist to the southwest, but it is almost destructed by the local people. This is the entrance of the temple on the courtyard. A large number of bricks, decorated bricks, terracotta objects, and potteries of earlier periods were used as construction materials to build the vihara. Here you can see decorated brick. It is used on the courtyard. this is veranda at southern wing, and we have found this terracotta object under the floor of this veranda. They have been used, these terracottas and potteries and brick pairs as the base of the veranda or the preparation of the veranda. Terracotta of Kurtamukha and all have been found from this level. These are the floral design. These terracotta objects used in this period. This is the terracotta of geometric shapes. These were also used as the decorated bricks or the plaques. And there were some red slipped on these terracotta plaques. A lot of decorated bricks also found from this level. This is the bowl-shaped pottery of the same level. These are the bowl-shaped base. We got a lot of fragments of stucco, plasters, and decorations. These may be locally, they prepare this from oyster shells. You can see that fragments of oyster shells with this stucco. At level 5, we cannot identify yet any structural remains. Maybe it can be they use the previous structural remains for their habitation, and we got a lot of medieval and late medieval potteries. Here there are some basins and the spouted vessels like plates and small potteries. These are also from level 5. Now, Jhurikara Mount. Jhurikara is located in Satkhira district in Tala Upazila. It is 1.5 kilometers from Tetulia Jama Mosque, and this site is 11 kilometers to the southwest of Dalijhara Mount. So here, the location map of Jhurikara. This is Jhurikara Mount, and this is Dalijhara Mount. Jhurikara is a structural mount. It is 45 meters east-west and 42 meters north-south, and about 3.1 meters high from the surrounding landscape. To the west of the mount, there are two other mounts with the structural remains, and another mount about 200 meters directly west of the mount. All these mounts have been demolished by the local people for brick hunting. And we have conducted an excavation in 2018-19 session, and our goals were to establish a detailed stratigraphy of the archaeological site and to establish the interrelationship of the various stages of construction and reconstruction of the architectural structure with stratigraphic context. So we got 6 levels, and they belongs to first 4 levels belongs to the early medieval period, and level 5 belongs to the medieval period, and medieval period in level 6. So the level 1 is architectural settlement, and 2, 3, and 4 is construction, destruction, reconstruction period, and level 5 was the addition. There is a small addition of this with this structure. This is the contour map of the Jhurikara, and this is the structural remains, composite structural plan drawing of Jhurikara, and this is the cellular structure and entrance to the west. There is a pathway around the temple, and there is a small structural remains added later in period 4. So this is the level 1 under the structural remains of level 2. This is the level 1 where we found early medieval potteries from this level. So this is level 2, the structure. The first construction was conducted in this level 2. This is the pathway, and this is the base of the temple. This is the outmost wall of the level 2 of the temple, and this is the procession path around the temple. This is the plan of the southeast part of the temple. This is the procession path, and these are the cells. Now, where you can see there is a wall of level 2, and this is the later addition of the wall of level 3. So in level 2, they constructed a wall, and later they destroyed the wall partially, and they added a wall in level 3. This is level 2 and 3 walls. So construction, reconstruction, destruction, and recycling of architectural materials of level 2, 3, and 4. This is the plan of level 2 at northwest part of the temple. This is the plan. This is the addition of later of period level 3. This is the plan of level 4. See, this wall has been added in the level 3, and there is a small cell which was also added in level 4. So this is the small cell of level 4, which they added later. In level 5, we could not identify any structural remains of level 5. Rather, we got a large amount of potteries from most of these potteries are from the pits or rubber trenches, and these are the black, brown, or chocolate slipware of the level 5, and this pottery belongs to medieval period, that means the Sultani and Mughal period. These are the gray potteries. These are some plates, spouted for vessels, basins of Sultani period, level 5. This is the section drawing of west to east, and this portion is the entrance. This is the temple, and here is the level 2 and 3. They have destructed this wall, and they have added a wall later, and maybe later in the period 3, they added this entrance, and there was a stair here, and this is the main entrance to the west. We also find some objects from level 4. There's some color beads. I'm not sure yet these are the in the Pacific type or not. This is the semi-precious stone beads of quartz. There is the bronze objects, fragments of bronze objects we found here. There are some decoration, but it's very difficult to identify. We got bangles and cowrie shells on the same level. We also found some fragments of stone objects, of sculptures, plates, pastels, and there are some terracotta objects like beads, tissue balls, and weights. And we also found some coins of British period of Emperor George III, Emperor George VI from level 6. These are the pottery of level 1. Most of them are bowl, and there's some hardis. These are the potteries of level 2. These are the potteries of level 5. There are some plates, basins. This is the red so level 5. This is an orthomosaic image of Jurijara mound after the excavation. This is the walls, and there are some cells. This is the central cells of the temple. Downliftments and cracks. It's a downlift, uplift. There is a crack at the eastern wall. The horizontally dislocated this wall, the portion. It's the uplift, and this is the downlift. This is the evidences of cracks and vertically dislocated. Now, this is the residence of Khan Jahan Mound. This is located at Bagherhat. This is known as a medieval city of Tolibatabad. This is the famous mosque of Flat Gumbud beside the residence of Khan Jahan. This is the mausoleum of Khan Jahan. According to our eyes, 6 levels with 4 periods. And there's a sculpture of Buddha found from Thakur Diki on the bed. Level 2, 3, and 4. Level 2, 3, and 4 belongs to Sultanate period. We designated that as pre-Khan Jahan because we got Chinese porcelain and greenish long-pond celadon of 13th, 14th century of Ming dynasty of China. And level 3, which is contemporary to the Khan Jahan. This is also Sultani period. The date of Khan Jahan mentioned in the inscription on this tomb is 1459 Christian era. And level 4, this is post Khan Jahan and late Sultanate, and Bagherhat was designated as a mean town, and we have found the coins of 1516 to 1535 Christian era. And level 5, this is post Khan Jahan and Mughal time frame. According to Aini Akbari, Khulifatabad was the shortcut of Bengal Suba during the Mughal periods. And 16th, 17th century maps, Khulifatabad and Khulifatabad identical with present Bagherhat. And we got some white painted red ware from this level, and this we identified as the Mughal period. And late medieval, this is colonial to onwards. This is the section on different periods of Khan Jahan's residence found. These are the potteries found from Kanjan's residence. This celadon ware, white painted wares, and this is Chinese porcelain, and these are the Turkish influenced potteries of spouted. This is the plan of Kanjan's residence with stratigraphic sequence. We have shown the different structural remains, the floors, and other things in different levels. It's a composite plan of the site. This is the map of Aini Akbari of Kalifatabad is mentioned here. This is the celadon where we have found there are some pipes of drainage, and this is the very thick floor of level 2. This is the structural remains of level 3, contemporary to Kanjan. These bichrome and monochrome glazed tiles found from this level. In level 4, these are structural. There's these walls. These are the belongs to the level 4. And post Kanjan period, there's a square structure with a stairway. Now 6 steps we have been found, and later this step has been blocked in the later period, and this belongs to the maybe Mughal period. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was lovely. Maybe if we can turn off the screen sharing now.
Okay, Pauline, screen share ta bondo koro.
Okay. Thank you very much. We never really get to clap properly.
No,
in these
Kathleen,
online
I
trainings.
need to summarize. And
Oh, you're
I said-
summarizing. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Please,
Okay.
my mistake.
Okay. So I will just share. I think this time there will be no problem.
Yes, sir. I have stopped.
Okay. Is it okay, Kathleen?
We still have the presenter view. You need to switch it back like last time. That's it. Good. Slideshow.
You could go.
Oh, where did it go? Did you stop sharing your screen? Now we only see you. Hmm. Okay, good. Now slideshow. Start from beginning. No, yeah. Okay, great.
Yes.
You're set. Are you talking? We can't hear you.
You're muted.
Now, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay.
And we can see you. This is good. So one more thing. Start the slideshow.
Again, there is problem, I think.
Aha.
Okay.
Or you can unclick use presenter view.
Okay.
Or here.
Perfect. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Syfur, thank you. And I would like to point out several aspects from his presentation. That we know that this is the Deltic zone of Bengal, and the thing is, I will just take the slides.
Okay.
Okay, this is the Deltic zone of the Bengal, that Bangladesh, that partially Pauline or Syfur was talking about. And they have, if I show my cursor, that is, okay. Okay. I don't know whether some technical issues. So he has shown sites around this region, and now it is clear that he has shown two structural mounds and excavation on two structural mounds and one of the habitational mounds with from different periods. And you all know there's the mound of Khanjahan is basically part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site of the Mosque City of Bagherhat. And this is the only habitational mound in the entire settlement where most of the sites and monuments, especially mosque and some other non-religious monuments. But the excavation on this Khanjahan Ali residence mound is one of the rare example of excavating a medieval, quote unquote, that is, there is problems with the periodization of medieval and early medieval. And I think most of the people in the audience are aware of these problems with the categorization of periods. But still, I must refer to the fact that despite the monument centrism or monument centric approach in this part of the delta, where two of the popular or most popular archaeological settlements of are Bagherhat, that Khanjahan Ali Boshod Bhita, and you all know about the Shad Gumbuz Mosque and all the other mosques. And another is Baro Bajar, close to on the same river bank, that is Bhairab river bank. And in Khanjahan Ali, in Baro Bajar also, most of the archaeological sites are monumental. So it is one of the rare example of habitational mound and excavation from the medieval period. And we suggest that despite your assumption of the beginning of the settlement in that particular site on around 14th century, the stratigraphy suggests that it just goes beyond 14th century, and it might have a pre-medieval, that is pre-13th century habitational remains, just partially preserved in those sites. And Dalijhara and Jhuri-Jhara, two of the structural mounds. But interestingly, the finding of the carbonized rice grains and along with some other potteries clearly suggests that we must rethink the very popular theory, which is, I think, one of the most normalized theory regarding the Islamization and settlement expansion in this part of Bengal. And this theory was proposed by Richard Eaton in his famous book, Rise of Islam in the Bengal Frontier, where he suggested that the human settlement in this Deltic plain started on around 16th, 17th century. And that started with the cultivation of rice after the reclamation of land from after forest clearance, and with the mediation of religious saints or peers. And these findings clearly prove that there was rice cultivation and also expansive settlements, as you will see from this map, that there are many other settlements in this region that can be dated to, for example, pre-13th century. And those settlements were, or those places were used continuously till 16th and 17th century. And I will show some of the sites from, sorry. I don't know what is the problem. Okay. These are the sites I will talk about very briefly. That this is the sites or settlements from Kopil Muni cluster of Paikgacha, Khulna, and here you can see the most of the remains in the top above the ground surface has been destroyed, but still we can find buried archaeological remains. And here the most of the settlements are destroyed by the contemporary habitations. Still there are some buried remains which can be investigated very closely. And we have also found several interesting artifacts. For example, we were talking about in our earlier discussions, I know Shuchandra D is here, Professor Shuchandra Ghosh, and Sutapa Sinha is here, and they will be happy to see that in Kopil Muni, the local people have recovered 3 hoards of cowrie shells, and those cowrie shells are both cut and uncut. And these cowrie shells, along with the spatial extent of Kopil Muni, is very important for understanding the settlement pattern in this very active alluvial landscape, where Kopil Muni is consists of 3 or 4 clusters of sites on in association with the Kopotakko River, which was referred by Kobadak River in the earlier text. And this is the site I was referring to when I was showing the first 2 images in the beginning of this presentation in Koira of Khulna. This is considered or referred to as a medieval fortification belonging associated with King Protapaditya of 17th century. But our observation and our findings of the survey suggest that there are significant and convincing evidence of pre-13th century settlements. For example, you can see this slide where you can find an unfinished sculptures from, and there are many surface occurrences of stones and stone fragments, these settlements. And you will see most of the households in this area were built from the bricks of this site. And there are buried structures and pottery deposits all over the places where people have dug for collection of soil, or people have dug for water and so on. And we have also found in situ floors made of lime plaster mixed with oyster and seashells, and also powdered bricks. And I know Professor Stackler will be very interested to look at these floor levels to find out whether he can identify any evidence of subsidence in this area or not. And Koira is very close to Sundarban, and we are moving just back to Sundarban. This is the river close to this Koira region. And we have also heard about finding of carbonized rice grains from this area, but we haven't yet just found it by ourselves. It was just testified by the locals. And interestingly, this entire area is a lowland locally known as bilt or wetland associated with the river, and there were deposits at least at 4 places in this lowland. So our question is whether there were the same wetland there when there was human occupation in this particular location, for example, on around 11th, 12th or 13th century, or whether the wetland were the later creation by the alluvial deposition process very close to the deltic environment. Now we'll get back to some of the sites I was referring to in Sundarban. And here I will refer to one of the very young man who is not trained in archaeology. He's Isme Azum Reju. He worked in a wildlife team for over 10 years. And he had grown his interest in archaeology, and he has found several archaeological sites within the Sundarban. So some of the photographs are definitely collected from him. And later, a team from the Directorate of Archaeology, Khulna and Barishal Division, along with him, surveyed some of the sites. And I will just show some of the photos, which will be very interesting. And this is one of the most confusing and interesting site in Sundarban area. And it is located just on the present coastline. And it is partially exposed only during the ebb. And it is extended over more than 800 meters within the river. And this is a huge structural remains. And we don't know how to conduct any kind of systematic archaeological investigation in this environment because of the logistics, because of the temporary exposure of the site, because of the situation under which we have to work without any sophisticated equipment. So there are some structural remains, square structures, which are only exposed during the ebb, and most of the structures are under the water. And these clusters are known as mostly in the Khejurdana, and these are some of the potteries and materials from these sites. And these are some of the archaeological mounds in Arpangasia and Kholpetua area within the Sundarban. And you can see some of the high structural mounds still being preserved in the Sundarban area. So we were just wondering how within this very dynamic and perpetually changing environment of the mangrove forest of Sundarban, how could these structural remains preserved? And how can the other structural remains were exposed? For example, in the next slide, we'll see the structural remains along with pottery deposits are being exposed by the riverbank erosion. And where some of the sites are being preserved, and at the same time, some of the archaeological sites which are composed of structures and potteries are being exposed by the riverbank erosion. This is in the same area. And these are also structural mounds within the Sundarban area. This is another exposed structure along with deposits of pottery, which is exposed by the current riverbank erosion. And this is also, we have talked about earlier because Professor Steckler and his colleagues and Professor Goodfried has referred to some of these findings of salt making kilns in the coastal area of Sundarban or Bengal. And we are not yet sure about the dates of these kilns because it is a continuous process. There is a long tradition of salt making in this area. So this is the findings that we have briefly just presented in our lecture on your presentation, which just bring to fore a few key points to engage with. First, how would we just understand the chronology of the processes and events when some of the sites are well preserved, some of the sites are being continuously modified, transported, and systematically changing. How could we relate the shift in the tidal alluvial environment with the shifts in the more coastal, close to the coastal zone, where in the northern part, where Syfur Rahman has shown the excavations, those are in the mature part of the delta, and in the Sundarban area, the active part of the delta. So there are differences in the intensity of the alluvial environment and intensity of the changing nature of the tidal rivers. Therefore, how do we correlate the situation in the Sundarban or mangrove area and the situation in towards the south or towards more south northern part? So this is another issue, and most important issue is the question of the people or communities or human engagement with the landscape. We are finding paddy grains, we are finding cowrie shells, we are finding extensive settlements. Many of the evidences of the settlements that have been found in recent years have not been presented in this presentation. For example, in the Satkhira and other western part of the Bangladesh Delta, that is close to West Bengal, there are many sites that belongs to pre-13th century and also to post-13th century. And it clearly suggests that people are actually living in this environment for at least more than 1,500 years. And interestingly, we are not finding any hiatus or break in the occupation. Perhaps there were spatial variability in the occupation and the chronological scale, but the changing pattern is not very clear. And we are also, we will also seek suggestion and request our esteemed colleagues and friends and scholars who are present here for suggestion regarding the future work to define the spatial and temporal events and processes within this part of the delta, which is not homogeneous right now and which was not homogeneous even in the past. And the final question is, how can we understand the human non-human relationship in such an active deltic part where it is very difficult to chronologically systematize the archaeological data and the data from the other disciplines and to correlate them and to interpret them. And I would like to thank everybody for your kind attention and patience. So I will just end now. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Please, Kathleen.
My apologies for interrupting you before. I'm just starting to panic because it was such an incredibly rich, incredibly generative presentation, both in terms of broad ideas and a lot of specific data and a lot of exciting directions actually to go. So I will start really by saying that the archaeology of, the archaeologies of deltaic regions are, as we know, and most of you know even better than I, incredibly valuable, that these are places with immense agricultural potential. They're very important to human history, but in many ways, the very processes that make these deltaic regions valuable to people also make them hard to study archaeologically. So that there are significant challenges, obviously, the very fluidity of the landscape, the deep deposition in many cases, and of course the fact that people continue to live in these, which is always a challenge to archaeologists, right? On a much smaller scale from my world in South India, I think about the Krishna Godavari Delta and the Kaveri Delta, which all the much more stable and much smaller than the Bengal Delta, have a similar kind of archaeological challenge, and that is in those areas we have about 2,000 years of text and archaeological based history, and we're pretty sure that there must be people there before, but it's not by any means easy easy to study. So, but it's extremely important. So let me just say a few words specifically about some of the data that we've heard, about some of the excavations and the empirical information, which is, you know, really rich and exciting. And then I'll have a few general comments, and then we'll open it up for question and answer. So the excavations, beautiful excavations that we saw, and I'm always delighted to look at lots of pictures of pottery and so on, but, you know, it was really fascinating. And of course, the first thing, you know, as a botanical analyst, I thought about the Dali mound is what is going on, you know, with all of that charred rice. You know, it's not just that there's rice, but it's a layer, it's spread out. I mean, I want to know much more about that. And very quickly, there was a mention of a garden of beetle and mahogany also. That's extremely interesting. But in both cases, of the two sites that we heard the most about, the Dali mound and the Juri mound, it's really interesting too to see the kind of record of destruction, of reconstruction, of reuse and recycling. Something, of course, we see on lots of archaeological sites. I mean, that's not, you know, unique to the Delta, but it does really, I think, bring up the question as how does the dynamism of this landscape related to the particular kinds of occupational and structural histories that we see at that site. And we had a nice kind of glimpse of it when we saw the wall with evidence of cracks, uplift, downlift, horizontal displacement, a kind of, you know, embodiment, you might say, of this incredibly, you know, active, dynamic kind of landscape. So that's extremely interesting. And I'm very interested to think about how those kinds of Buddhist monastic sites interact with their environment, and about, you know, how the movements of the land and water affect, you know, human occupation there. So, and again, that's interesting. So I didn't mention near the end an important point, and I've heard him say it before, and I'm not sure. You have to send me the citation, because what I think is a really important thing that, you know, we're seeing in archaeological and historical work in Bangladesh is that the material record is showing us the limitations, obviously, of some of the kind of environmental history that we've seen. So Dick Eaton's, you know, very nice, very acclaimed book, Rise of Islam and the Bengal Frontier. I mean, I think, you know, we've seen quite definitively that it's not convincing, that we have pre-13th century settlements, that people are there by the 13th century. We have that lovely charred rice, that these settlements are used continuously through the 16th, 17th century, as we just heard, right? So that's a way in which, you know, there are other ways of understanding this kind of occupation, and that's something that the historical scholarly world needs to know about. I'm fascinated, of course, also by these sites in the Sundarbans. I mean, wow, how about that? So 1,500 years of occupation in that area. Again, this is not the kind of place where you can do traditional pedestrian archaeological survey. I mean, that's just not on, right? But obviously there's an urgent need to document these sites and to understand, you know, what they are and how people live in these places. So, I mean, this is extraordinary work, I think, and it's going to be really important, not just for Bangladesh or for the Bengal Delta, but for understanding in a kind of broader way how people manage and coexist in environments like this, which is obviously a pressing question for us today. So let me just kind of jump from that, and I hope that we'll get a lot of good questions from the audience to discuss these specific data that we heard, to think a little bit about methods. And, you know, one thing that I think that this seminar series shows very clearly, and particularly in the kind of theoretical framing of thinking about human, non-human agents and their interaction, and kind of demanding an understanding of landscape history, as one that involves both human and non-human forces, that obviously interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary research is the only way we're going to understand that, right? So we need the earth sciences, we need archaeology, we need history, and so on. We see a really exemplary lineup of speakers in this, which I think is right, and I think it's, you know, it's the only way forward, right? But I know also from personal experience that it's not all that easy. You can't just take, you know, a geologist and an archaeologist and put them in the same room and imagine that, you know, some sort of magic is going to happen and they're going to easily work together, right? It's going to take a really serious intervention on both sides, right? We're both going to have to rethink our questions, rethink our approaches, and really open up to the ideas and the concerns of the other disciplines. And this was brought out very nicely in the introduction, right? So more than just, you know, multidisciplinary research or interdisciplinary research, in this paper, the authors really demanded that we question our own forms of knowledge, right? Our disciplinary practice. And that and the framing of the whole conference really is pushing us away from kind of the sort of old-fashioned modernist, or say dualist ontologies that separate, you know, nature from culture, right? And this is not something that's easy for us to really do. We don't have the vocabulary for it often, and it's a challenge on both sides. I mean, for those trained in the humanities or the social sciences, there's a tendency to see environmental transformation as something out there, something entirely external to human beings. Although, you know, with the sort of definition of an Anthropocene, I think maybe the idea that humans have had a fairly, you know, important, if not always beneficial impact on the Earth system is something, you know, that is not so radical anymore. But how do we do that? And this is something that a group of colleagues and I are working on too. Working with environmental scientists, archaeologists, and climate modelers, and you know, these are radically different worlds. So what we saw then is a need to really kind of be open to think and to rethink together. And there was some discussion in Shwadin's introductory section about, you know, really important challenges, like the issues of scale, right? So spatial scale, you know, are we talking about entire river deltas, or are we talking about small rivers? We're talking about human set habitations and settlements, and issues of scale are really, you know, critically important here. And we saw it very vividly in the demonstration, where we're looking at, you know, 3 steps in a small structure. And on the other hand, we're thinking about an entire massive river delta. I mean, how do we go back and forth between disciplines that give us this kind of micro scale, oh, look, here's this adorable little potsherd, and, you know, the sort of macro scale. And scaling up and scaling down is a problem for all of us, right? And the other kinds of scale also are obviously issues of temporal scale, right? So geological periods and, you know, sort of scale on a human scale, thinking about it in terms of generations. So there are certainly issues of chronology, and it looks like, you know, that there are some challenges yet to be dealt with. But even if you had all the radiocarbon dates in the world, it's still, you still have these, you know, same kinds of problems. Okay, so my notes are kind of confusing to me. I've got all these like little numbers and everything anyway. Okay, so there's these kinds of, you know, methodological challenges that we see in dealing not just with the archaeology of deltas, but really with, you know, any kind of study of the past, right? The kind of multidisciplinary approaches, the kind of understanding of disciplinary ontologies and scales. But beyond, you know, actually sort of documenting what happened in the past, how did water tables change, you know, what were people growing, all these sort of what you might in some ways think of as matters of fact, there's yet another kind of important dimension, and that is, you might say, the dimension of understanding, right? So beyond documentation, it's also thinking of understanding and listening to the actually listening to the chat before the presentation was also very nice for me because, you know, people are talking about the onset of the monsoons and the sweet water and salt water, and, you know, sort of the kinds of concerns of, you might say the archaeology is, you know, are obviously the concerns of people living in that area right now. So it made me think actually back to a kind of classic work that most of you probably know by Blakey and Brookfield, an important book called Land Degradation and Society, which really got a lot of kind of political ecology work going. So it was published, I think, in the 80s. And Blakey and Brookfield wrote about land degradation as a culturally specific term, right? Degradation is degradation relative to what, for whom, where land is degraded relative to a particular human purpose, right? In which people want it to be. And similarly, then that kind of idea, so it's a kind of, you know, we say beyond a nature culture kinds of thing. It's a, you know, land degradation on the one hand can be measured, you know, in terms of erosion, grain size, chemical characterization, and so on. But degradation rather than change is a cultural construct, right? So it has to, so it's both human and natural. Similarly, when you think about these delta environments, and I will freely confess that I've never worked in one, think about how floods are viewed or how water and land are viewed is really relative to cultural context. And I'm just struck by something I heard, you know, many years ago at a conference, heard Rohan D'Souza and talking about the same landscape on talking about colonial and post-colonial changes in the Bengal Delta, talk about the change from a landscape and a kind of human world that's flood adapted to one that's flood prone, right? So the floods haven't changed, but the humans have changed, right? So this really, you know, kind of makes me think of the call that we heard in this paper. The authors urge us to push beyond anthropocentrism in archaeology, right? I also really like the idea of canals that bring in salt water and crocodiles, right? The kind of notion of a self-inflicted damage, right? So when Rohan says change from flood adapted to flood prone, it does have a bit of a tendency to suggest that everything was great, you know, in the kind of pre-colonial period, everything was adapted, it was harmonious. We hear this all the time, right? But we know that, you know, people in the past also mess things up as well. So I'm moving toward the end here. We can open it up to questions, and then I'll take the different questions. So when we think about land and water, and this is as we say, everyone, you know, uses words like active, like dynamic, shifting, and, you know, we worry about, you know, where was the coastline at this point, and where is the old, you know, an old river channel. But that land and water are, of course, the most fundamental kind of non-human actors in human worlds. They support plants and animals, obviously, including us, but they also shape our world in really fundamental ways. So they shape our world in terms of rhythms, right? So now we're in the monsoons in South Asia anyway. I think in Philadelphia, we also now suddenly have monsoons with a changing climate here. Everyone's now calling it warm and wet Philly. So it rains constantly now. But there's the kind of cyclical world of the monsoons and also of growing seasons, right? And water and the interaction between land and water and the possibilities, the affordances it gives to cultivation also affect, so if those were rhythms, you might say another dimension is balance, right? So balance can be, for example, a sense of abundance, of drainage, of floods. And, you know, this is probably my perspective as someone who works in a semi-arid landscape, to look at these, you know, very sort of moist landscapes and think, wow, you know, they just have so much water, almost like too much water. And it reminds me of, I will embarrass myself in front of literary Bengalis by saying this, but of a novel I read that took place in colonial period Bengal, because I can't remember the author. But it was a wonderful novel about a gardener, and the the main character was interviewing people to be a gardener for his estate in Calcutta. And he asked each person, what is gardening? And the successful candidate said, gardening is preventing plants from growing, right? Because you have, such a kind of dynamic landscape where the water and silt is, really in abundance. And sometimes it's too much, to be sure, right? But there's a kind of sense of landscapes in which the balance is more on the side of scarcity. And this is more like the landscape in which I'm familiar, where I work in interior of South India, right? This is a semi-arid region where there's less than 50 centimeters of rainfall a year. It all comes in the summer monsoon. And so saving up the scarce monsoon rain is critical, right? So the water harvesting, surface water, and groundwater, and the reservoirs or tanks, very important for recharging wells. So there's a very kind of different sense of that. So that's a sense of balance, you might say. And then the third thing that the land and the water sort of bring, I think, to the dynamic of human worlds also then is a landscape or a kind of sense of significance, right? And we also saw that in the opening statement about the kind of effective and meaningful worlds of the Delta, like the Delta as a country of ebb, which is very nice, right? So if we think about significance of agrarian and irrigated landscapes in South India, we can see quite clearly that that irrigation features, for example, are political. They're also obviously economic, and they're meaningful places, ritual places in a landscape, right? So they're meaningful and ritual both to people in the past, but also to us in the present and the future. So this very wide-ranging presentation really pushes us to think about how can we understand the relationships of humans and non-humans in the past, and specifically, how can we understand these relationships in a particular kind of world, a world with a particular kinds of rhythms of silt, of water, of monsoon and growing season, river, a particular kind of balance, particular sets of significance, right? And those rhythms, of balance, of significance is, not something that was just there in the past, but it's also something that's constantly changing past and will certainly continue to change in the present, and is, foundational to the life worlds of, many people. So I'm really so congratulate the authors. I think that was, really fascinating. There's much more that could be said, and more, I would say, I probably will wake up at night and remember what I meant to add. But let me go ahead and open up to questions. And I have, let's see, I'm going to open up the Q&A here. I have been instructed, let's hope this works, that people should ask the questions in the Q&A rather than in the chat.
So there is no question in the question.
There's no question, so I'm going to go to that. I was going to ask you. Okay, so we do have a question.
One or two. This is in the comment box.
Okay.
Chat box. We copy this from the Facebook page. Then
okay, I'll just go back and forth then between the chat and the Q&A, and if anybody has anything, please do it now. Okay, so we do have a question here by Zahin Khalid. What about conducting archaeological survey studies doing LiDAR technology? Good. Would you like to answer LiDAR?
In fact, the same question was asked, I think, after Professor Steckler's beautiful presentation. And perhaps I am not the right person to answer this. Professor Steckler is more knowledgeable than me about using LiDAR for such landscape or such forest region. I would like to request him.
Sure. I think LiDAR in Bangladesh would be great. I've been trying to see if I can get people interested in doing LiDAR. I think there's also, could be useful for using ground penetrating radar to look below the surface as well. Or, I mean, I have resistivity equipment, which is not nearly as high resolution. And there are people using, other kinds of remote sensing to look at landscape changes like INSAR. So I think there's a lot of geophysical techniques that we can try to find ways to apply to this area.
Excellent. I would like to have LiDAR too. If anyone has any LiDAR, just, spare, bring it on down. Other questions?
Dr. Kaushik Gangopadhyay and Dr. Vishnupriya Boshan both have raised their hand, I think, from the panelists.
Okay, I can't see them. So, oh yes, there's a little raised hand. Okay, so let's start with Kaushik since he's a little higher on my list.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kath. How are you? Meeting up.
I'm good. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you again. Yeah, so congratulations, Shadin, and it was a remarkable presentation. And as we were talking about this human and non-human presence in the Delta, can we think about this kind of a picture if I try to sum it up? So the data that we are getting in West Bengal is a little earlier, say about 9,900 BC, and the non-human elements we are getting are the preliminary data shows are largely wild varieties of rice and a lot of wild animals also. And then moving towards a site like, say, Chandrakitugar, which would be about, say, about 3rd century BC, 2000 years, we do have this kind of rice, carbonized rice, domesticated, not wild, right? Domesticated carbonized rice from Chandrakitugar, found on the lower levels. And then moving towards more towards the eastern part of the Delta where you are working, getting, this kind of rice, carbonized rice. I was wondering the context, so could it be, when we think about this non-human presence, could it be some kind of this wild to domestication of rice and some kind of, can we visualize, the popular, the Delta being populated, because of this kind of activity from wild to domestic. So the data that I'm getting supports a lot of wild varieties, both plant and animals, right? And when we move towards Chandrakitugar, we have, as far as I know, we do not have that much of wild varieties of animals, but mostly domesticated animals with carbonized rice, which is in the center of the Delta. We go towards east, we have more domesticated, species of plant. I do not know about animals because I did not see it. So can we visualize that? This is question number one. And question number two is, the fact that the historians and the archaeologists have always talked about movement of population from west to east following the Ganges. If you imagine where Tamluk was, and they say by about 8th century AD, Tamluk is deserted, and because the Ganges goes on shifting towards the east, and they keep on moving towards the east, as if it's just a trade, okay? That helps them or kind of propels them to movement. But do you think that since you are pointing out this network, that whether that was really important, whether the shift of Ganges, whether it happened or not, it obviously happened. Was it that important from a historical point of view? Should we put trade, as we were talking about, at the apex of our understanding of the Delta from the early historic till the medieval period, which has been done by many archaeologists and historians? So these are my two questions. Thank you.
Okay. May I?
Please.
Okay. Thank you, Kaushik. I can't answer your question regarding, for example, charred rice. I think Kathleen is better than me to answer that question. I don't have expertise on paleobotany or something like that. But I was wondering, and I was also talking to Dr. Shurmi Chakraborty, regarding this issue of chronological imbalance between the western part of the Delta in West Bengal and our Delta. I don't know whether it is the lack of archaeological research or the conceptual and methodological aspect of research, or whether it is really the situation. for example, Ganges definitely shifted, and I was talking about this shift and problem with the chronology in one of my I think after Professor Steckler's lecture, that for example, we have evidence regarding the beginning of the shift of the Ganges River from the Hugli Bhagirathi to present Padda River before 10th 11th century. And Wahid Palash, Dr. Wahid Palash, who was there, he was also suggesting that the shift was not necessarily a post 15th 16th century phenomena. The evidence is biased because of the presence of the cartographic evidence from Gastaldi to Renel. So, and before that, we don't have any idea about the shift. So I was also thinking about, and I asked Professor Steckler about whether it is possible to devise a methodology or some methodology to understand these changes of the Ganges. And regarding Chandraketugor, again, I would like to refer to my discussion with Dr. Shomi Chakraborty that I don't know whether there is systematic work on the charred rice from the Chandraketugor. I haven't read the literature. And another issue is that we are getting early historic, for example, 4th, 3rd century evidence. We see evidence from Chandraketugor and Tamluk. But in this Bangladeshi part, we haven't yet encountered any early historic material. Why is that? And it can be because of the lack of intensity or coverage of our study. That could be one aspect. Another aspect is that it has not been preserved here. Or another aspect could be that what you have pointed, that migration of the people. So it can be anything, I don't know. But for example, regarding Tamluk, you know better than me. I don't know whether Tamluk excavation report and the evidence from Tamluk excavation should be rethought or not. I am not sure because there is no report. There is no report. Even regarding Chandraketugor, I was asking several times Dr. Shomi Chakraborty that whether it is possible to re-excavate some other places and do some systematic stratigraphic understanding with the aid of radiocarbon dating or not. So therefore, as we have already seen some of the earlier theories regarding urbanization is abandoned. Yes. So the notion of the abandonment of Tamluk after early historic period can be rethought, but I don't know whether it is possible.
Yeah, it was not actually abandoned. You know, that is the problem in our archaeology which you're pointing out. You know, we see a kind of when we don't find things, we say it's abandoned. But surface survey has proved that it was not actually abandoned. Right? It was never abandoned because we do get medieval pottery, a lot of medieval pottery, early medieval stuff, right? But if you see the report is in a way so adjusted rather to say that it is Tamralip report. And again, there's a marriage between epigraphy and archaeology because you know about that 8th century Ayodhya, that Hajideva inscription. So people will say, see, we do not have any epigraphic material pertaining to Tamluk after that. So 8th century is seen as a kind of a mark beyond which Tamluk possibly did not continue, but it continued. It continued as a riverine port, and we have enough medieval and colonial report to suggest it was a major center, till even the colonial period. So again, but Chandraketugor, the story is different. The story is entirely different. It was actually buried, and it changed its nature. So, like we are saying that now, I think we should look into the delta in a piecemeal fashion, and then possibly get back to the whole picture, rather than looking at, as I was saying, that Ganges shifts and people they start, they follow the Ganges, like an environmental determinism, blindly. Okay, let us follow the Ganges, right? It is, I think, it's the story, and let us carry on our trade from west to east. Because it's, definitely the pottery that you showed us, Rajat, my other colleague is not here. That is Mogolmari. We have exactly decorated those type of decorated bricks. Rajat will be able to tell you more. And I think Shrutapati will tell you the pottery that you showed from medieval sites are exactly those that they bind in gold. Maybe Shrutapati, they're same, right? So you see, from gold to your delta, we have this pottery, which is like very similar to each other. So these questions are coming up now. So Yeah.
And again, I was thinking about the nature of the sites in the Sundarban area, the structural remains which are partially exposed. What was it and how did it function in that time? So there are many questions, and we have
there are more people waiting for.
Okay, so I have an order here, not to worry. I have Bishnupriya. I'm just going in the order that's asked, and then Colleen, and then Carol. So Bishnupriya, you're next on my list.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kathleen. Shadin, I have two very short questions because I think there are many waiting in the queue, and this can just go on. Before that, let me just make one comment. That is, you showed not the excavated ones, but when you were showing the map, you showed a structural mound. Now we have, Kaushik may remember, we have, I have seen a similar mound like that in Baishata. Okay, and so it is, as you said, it's very, one has to do more work to find out why in certain places some mounds are getting preserved, why in others mounds are not getting preserved. Anyway, but my questions are different. One relates to Satish Chandra Mitra. Satish Chandra Mitra, Joshur Khulnar Itihash, probably it's the first volume or second, please correct me, possibly it's the first volume. He talks about this area, right? He talks about these cyclones. He talks about a landscape completely ravaged by cyclones, and he talks of the Mogs, you know, the pirates, right? The Portuguese. So you get a kind of sense of a place, say sense of a place even going back to 16th or 17th century, 16th century, that, you know, it was, according to Satish Chandra's descriptions, kind of history, that things were just abundant, that it was forest infested, and this, you know, surge, storms, and he also talks of subsidence, if you remember. So how do you relate this to what you said, that we have last 1500 years of occupation? That is one question. The second question is, because you talk, and we have discussed on that, that is the land-water entanglement. I would be very interested to know the archaeology that you just showed us, whether you have investigated other means. I know you are expert in doing that, you and your team. Say if there is folklore, if there are legends, which talks of an entanglement of water and land. So I'll stop here because there are many questions. So later, when we have time for more discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Bishnupriya Boshak. I would like to ask you one just, I always forget to ask. The Deulvita temple, is there any mound under the temple?
Are you talking of Deulbari or Jotar Deul?
No, Deulbari.
Deulbari, yes. I did not show you the photographs, but I have photographs, and you saw Deulbari is like, I don't know whether Kaushik has ever been there. Deulbari is in Kultoli. I had showed you the map. And as I said, it was on a raised ground. And after Ayla, the water hadn't reached there. But after Amphoon or Amphan, that part, if you remember my picture, that part was submerged. That's what I heard from local accounts. I haven't been able to get back there for the last, all this pandemic period. But I have pictures, later maybe I can share with you, when I had gone for field work, that there is a deposit. I could be there for a very short time, absolutely in the interior. So there is a deposit, and one needs to look at, and pottery sticking out, which could be your medieval pottery. But it's very interesting. I will share pictures with you if you want later.
Thank you. So let me just attend to your questions very briefly. First thing is that when, for example, Kathleen was referring to this water management, the semi-arid area, and the management of monsoon water, So I was just thinking about how distressed I was when I went to Koira, the site I have shown you, because for the last 10 years, people are not getting drinking water. And it is not the case only in the Koira, but also in the southern part of Satkhira region, in the southern part of the Khulna region. There are many areas where drinking water is not available. And people, what are they doing? Some local NGOs have built some reservoirs and they collect and preserve rainwater. But problem is that they cannot supply drinking water for the entire year. So they are just compelled to drink salty, even very iron-rich water. And I had to drink 2 glasses in Koira, and I was having stomach problem. And interestingly, in this part of the delta, the problem of salinity is not new. As if we look at the literature or the studies, it will seem that the problem of salinity is very, very recent phenomena. But from the literature and from the oral traditions that we are working on, or that we often encounter, that there are water reservoirs or tanks. For example, in Koira, close to Koira, there are tanks which are, according to oral legends, which are associated with Khan Jahan Ali. And these tanks were dug in a particular place where the aquifer was full of drinking water, that fresh water, not salty water. And this salt and sweet, that is salt and salty water and fresh water dynamics, is very important in this part of the delta for sustaining one's life. For example, if I want to go into the Sundarban reserve forest, I have to take ample amount of drinking water with me. Otherwise, I will just die. So there were excavated tanks, and many tanks are still surviving in this area, at least from the medieval period, which were used for preserving monsoon water, for using for the drinking, as well as probably for the harvest also, and for various ritual purposes, like they do these days too. And also, there were particular communities who were expert in finding the locations where such ponds or tanks should be dug. And they were hereditary professions. And we have, for example, I may refer to one of the very interesting publications. It is little magazine from West Bengal, the Lok. There was a special issue on Dighi Jolashoy, and there are some very interesting articles regarding these traditional knowledge and occupation groups who were involved in the digging of tanks, and particular rituals involved in the digging of tanks. So preservation of monsoon water, use of the groundwaters for drinking, and use of the water for different purposes, different times, they are not recent phenomena as far as we have understood. This is the first thing. And second thing is that, yes, we are encountering or recording and talking to people to understand various oral legends and histories and many other things. And not only Satish Chandra Mitra, many other texts from the Mughal period refers to the two different collectives who were termed as the aggressors in this region. One is Mog, who were from the Arakan in Myanmar. Another was Harmat, who were the Portuguese Portuguese mercenaries. And interestingly, Portuguese mercenaries were involved also in the Mughal army. They were in the Baroviyas, in the Protapaditya's army. And some of them were just pirates. And interestingly, Shondip and the other coastal area, there are legends with some of the pirate leaders. And there are rhymes and there are songs just making the Harmad, were basically pirate and ravaged this land and involved in the slave trade and many other issues. So they are already present in the oral narratives. And Sanjay Subramaniam's work, Sushil Chaudhury's work, and many other works have referred to this particular Mog and Portuguese dimension on this delta, but we cannot go beyond that. That is another issue. And another point of your question was that this Mog Harmad, beyond this Mog Harmad, we can't just the oral history and the other legends and folklores or whatever we call them, we cannot trace back their origin. So where should we put them if we take them on temporal scale? We have colonial records, but before that, we cannot go beyond that convincingly. That is another problem with understanding this perception of the land and water in terms of the oral narratives and other things in the before 15th or 16th century. That is another problem.
But perhaps they can give you another scale. I mean,
definitely. They're giving you another scale as well as they can give us some ideas regarding, for example, these sweet and salt water dynamics. For example, I was referring to these introductory section or introductory notes in the songs and panchalis and other narratives where people are worshipping and people are just showing their devotion to human, non-humans and superhuman beings. And still the worships are very popular. For example, this year in January, there was more than 3,000 small mandobas in the Khulna, Satkhira region for the worship of Bonobibi. So these are very popular, and Gaji song is not very popular these days. It is being just extinct or incorporated by the urban elites. Still, Gajir Geet and their performance is popular. And there are many occasions of these narrations where particular professional groups come to perform in different parts of this tidal zone in particular time of the year. So this aspect of the oral narratives or discursive traditions are very important, I think.
Okay, yeah,
I
great.
completely
Thank
agree.
you. Yeah, there's also, of course, in peninsular India, specialized, groups of people who build tanks. So it's a, it's
I have read your. I was
yeah.
inspired by after reading your paper, the
Oh,
Vijayanagara and
Yeah.
water management.
And watering livestock, of course, not only
Yeah.
watering humans, but watering livestock is
Livestock.
critically important. So Colleen has a question. Hope I'm pronouncing your name properly.
Colleen is in the attended list. I asked
Oh,
her
we can
she can't,
bring
she can
him,
type it in, huh?
bring her to.
I will, sir. I will, sir.
Okay. Please
You
bring
just,
her to as the panelist.
Dr. Carol can
Okay,
ask.
well then, while you're doing that, we'll ask Carol to go ahead and ask her a question then.
Dr. Carol?
Sorry for misspelling your name, Carol.
It's okay. I'm not
She's here.
quick enough with the unmute there. I have a comment and a question. I think this idea of, I wouldn't have talked about necessarily anthropocentric until I began to realize that anthropocentric would be leaving out all the ways that people engage with the environment. And so that got me to understand, I think, a little bit more about that. But with reference to scale, there are points of connection. Landscape is a nice big one, and people talk about, excuse me, landscapes of food or fiber or fuel or fodder. I would maybe add medicinal and devotional to that, and their management. And sometimes when we think about the word management, we see a sort of top-down version of that. But actually the notion of when you say, well, we're managing, means that the conditions aren't very good, but we're figuring something out. So I would like to take the kind of very basic understanding of managing. And this brings me to my question, which is, I didn't hear Dr. Islam's talk, but one piece that I'm missing about the environment of Bangladesh is how feasible ethnobotany is. You know, what is the what are the problems of preservation? Pollen is pretty resistant. Can you use pollenography? There are chemical signatures that are now coming available to look for plants inside of vessels and things like that. And so I'm assuming that there's at least some degree of that sort of more physical analysis, but also textual analysis, particularly. I mean, I would think that medicinal and devotional kinds of things would be part of, as well as the other kinds of needs, would be part of the textual evidence. And I'm assuming that there are there is diversity in the vegetation mapping, that it's not simply a homogeneous vegetational world. And part of that, of course, is the fresh, brackish, and saltwater distinctions. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is how feasible is ethnobotany in that realm?
Thank you, Professor Carol. In the earlier lecture, Dr. Kaushik Gangopadhyay was talking about some paleobotanical studies from his side, right, Kaushik? So,
yeah, I was, yeah.
And some of the, one of our colleagues is working right now in Oxford on some of the paleoethnobotanical remains, and some of the published work, for example, by Stanley and Hyatt, and some other works who have worked on the mangrove remains, which are found buried even up to in the Calcutta, and we are getting is up to Jashore in this part. I think there is a very good prospect of paleoethnobotanical analysis from this part, and that is very critical for our understanding of the entire ecology and its spatial and temporal dynamics. And it can be even we are getting some bones from, for example, during this webinar series, we have found some bones. Some local people informed us, and we went there and collected some bones. We haven't yet identified it, but the problem is that we don't know the dates of these bones. Earlier there were findings, and I was talking about this boy Ismail Reju. He has also recovered several cut bones with cut marks, and even the shells of the tortoise and some other zooarchaeological remains, faunal remains from Sundarban area. The problem is with that, we don't have the dates, and we can date them. But I really believe that paleoethnobotany has a very good prospect for this Deltic part. We have to be just careful about the context and the dates. That is.
Super.
One thing I would say about the pollen, oddly enough, is that I have a Bangladeshi scholar, Anana Zulfikar Sholi, I believe a former student of yours, sorry,
Yeah.
who's coming this month to
Yeah, I
Philadelphia.
know.
She gets
Mhm.
her visa. So
Mhm.
she's coming to my lab to work on some material to look at hopefully we'll get some pollen preservation. And then I would think that phytoliths
She has collected.
also,
She has collected
she has
samples from
collected it, right?
Dalijara.
Yeah, she's planning to come to Philadelphia
And the site you have seen, the Dalijara today?
no,
No,
oh,
no,
that's
our
that same site.
presentation.
That same site.
She came
Okay, well,
here
good.
to
Now
collect
I've
the
seen
samples.
photos. So yeah, she's coming to my lab. We haven't met in person yet. But I think that could be a nice beginning. And then I think phytoliths also would be a good possibility. Obviously, they preserve nicely and tell you different kinds of things.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of scope for doing that. I would think that, and like some of the kinds of questions that you're asking, you know, about landscapes, and so you really need plant and animal remains to answer those. You know?
And
I was yes, Professor Stickler.
I just add that, you know, across the Sundarbans, as you go from fresher in the east to saltier in the west, the species completely change, and so there's a lot of you know, within that, I mean, within the sediments, there's a lot of problems of preservation of organic matter because, you know, everything gets eaten, you know, so we find it, you know, rather limited amount of material for dating, you know, what Steve Goodrick.
What's the pH like?
I don't know what
in fact, I may add that maybe one comment here, one line comment.
Sure.
Yeah, go.
Yes. Yeah, I think my one-line comment would be that if we are talking about looking at a landscape, the estuarian landscape is very rich, was very rich. You know, so we get all sorts of species, tortoise, even dolphins. You know, we get bones of those animals which were being used by humans. They were being carved and they were being used by humans. So this, if we talk about degradation, is the degradation of the estuaries. I think, you know, that's a very critical area where people lived in Deltic region, I think Bengal Delta. So I think we need to look at the estuaries very carefully. You know, like, and phytoliths have been preserved, lipids have been preserved. Only as Shadin said that in India and Bangladesh, because we are technologically a little handicapped, not now anymore in India, we are getting our labs. We can get all this variety of data and then, you know, maybe go ahead and use our oral history and things like that. So that would be my one comment.
Let's work together. So Colleen, I think you can speak now. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Would you hear me? So hello everyone. I feel a bit impressed because I'm probably the one with the less experience here amongst all those famous panelists. So hi everyone. So for the ones who do not know me, I'm working in Mahastangar. And I have few comments and just questions. But first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this seminar and to congratulate Mita, Pauline, Shadin for their very nice, interesting work in Khulna. So it's very exciting.
This is their work, not mine.
But they are repeating that you are the advisor and blah blah blah. So I feel, and anyway, it's a teamwork. So, but it's very very nice. So I'm very impressed, and I hope that I will be able to visit the next time that I will be in Bangladesh. Then yes, I will just continue and provide some comments on this ethnoarchaeobotany, because in Mahastans, with the new excavation programs that we started in 2014, we have started to work with the Mizanur Rahman, who is the archaeobotanist about about who Shadin was talking about. And we have discovered also layers of charred carbonized rice. And in Mahastan, it's associated with a kind of a thick levels of probably ancient floodings. So it's not really associated with, you know, an area of work, you know, or a kitchen area or something like that. It has not been, I mean, we have, of course, some rice sometimes in some pots, but not really in a proper, you know, human activity layers. I mean, it's so I hope that with the Mizanur Rahman analysis, which is still going on, we will get the answer, maybe if it was white rice, domesticated rice, in which context. So that should come up when we will have finished the analysis and the excavation of this new, program of excavations. Then I would like also to do some residue analysis on some vessels, because it's true that I'm also following the Two Rains Conference project. I don't know if you are familiar with that, but they are focusing, on the Hindus civilization and the end and the factors that provoke, the continuity or change or end of this Hindu civilization. It's an ERC project conducted by Professor Cameron Petrie. And, the ones working in this part, they are super updated with the new technologies, and they have done any kind of analysis. They have a lot of fundings also to do that. So, and they did residue analysis, and in France, some people are doing them also. So it would be possible to have again a partnership, and to export maybe some shirts in France to do some residue analysis. So that will be possible and not too costly also. So we can maybe have a try with the pottery of Mahastan, and just after that, if it works, we can, enlarge in other archaeological sites. Of course, this will be a beginning. Regarding also the survey methodologies, we did in Mahastan also last year, we tried the magnetic survey, and the electricity and the magnetic resistivity survey. It works, but the ratio cost and kind of results to be analyzed, it's not the most efficient. That means that you have a lot of layers with destructions, so a lot of bricks, a lot of brick bars, and so the result that you get actually will not tell you exactly what you have really done actually. So of course you have some images, so you have some data, so it should be wrong to say that it doesn't work, but it's not the most effective way to find, an ancient site. And the mission of Mahastan also, it's involved, has been integrated in a ERC program, which is called Dharma, and we have a bit more money, which is a good thing. And with that, with that money that we have in plus, we were thinking to maybe try a LIDAR survey in Mahastan and in the surroundings. The thing is that, I have provided some, of course, the landscape of Mahastan is completely different than the Sunderbans. So I don't know if it can work for this, Sunderban things. But one of the things about which we have to think about is that you have a lot of paddy fields very often, and so you have a lot of different kind of so landscape. You don't have the same layer, so you have areas when you will have water and other when you will not have. So so basically, when I have shown and when I have asked to some specialists, they all told me, okay, it's 50-50. You have to try to see which kind of results you will get. So maybe we will try just to have an idea, because it's only this Dharma project will end for only 5 years or something like that. It will be probably the only time when we will get enough money to do that. So we will let you know if it works or not, and if you are going for that or not. But definitely, maybe Kaushik will be able also to provide some more information. But I remember also that our colleague Rajat Sanyal said that in some sites they have tried also, a lot of different kind of survey. It's the technologies, and that actually their results were not very good also. I don't know if Kaushik, you confirm that or not, and that at the end the best way was just the yes, pedestrian or analysis of satellite images, and working like that, and working with these different combinations, and trying to record the rainfall and the things, and trying to analyze those data together because the new technology was not, it works, but not really well, actually. Yes, and one thing also which is very interesting is that I'm happy to see that in Khulna or in the suburbans in this area you found bones, because in Mahastan we don't have, actually. I mean, it's so we don't have bones from animals and things. And I remember that the explanation which is provided is that the pH of the soil is too high, actually, and so it doesn't allow the preservation of the things. But it could be a good indicator, it's true, during the excavation to see which places has, you know, just the fact to have bones or not actually could be an indication of the ancient landscape. So that it's something, because it's really, yeah, I mean, I have the habit to have animal bones and something, and in Mahastan we never find any. I mean, it's yes, so I think that that's it. So, and thank you again for all those very nice presentation, very interesting one.
Response?
I know Colin is one of our very close friends and colleagues. So we are well aware of the French mission's work in this area. And I think, and I learned basically the excavation from Jean-Yves, who was the excavator in 1998 when I just completing my graduation. The Jean-Yves is my guru in excavation. And my PhD co-supervisor is Jean-François Salle, and who was the former director of the French mission. So we are well aware of this French work in Mahastan. But I would like to just, one thing I would like to add with Colin, that it is not possible to do pedestrian survey the way, for example, we do in northern part of Bangladesh. In the Sundarban area, even in the area which is not forested, it is very difficult to do pedestrian survey because of the fact that the communication, the roads and the transport is very different than the northern part. The terrain is very different, and because of the shrimp cultivation for the last 20 to 30 years in this entire area, most of the area is submerged, even during the winter. So it is underwater. And even it is not possible to see anything. The visual detection process is not working here. So we have to find other techniques or other sort of things. And most importantly, it is also the matter of money and logistics. Because, for example, the Directorate of Archaeology went for 2 days survey within the Sundarban, and they needed a lot of money to do that, for the rent of the boat, for manage all the logistics, and they had to take 2 to 3 rifle armed guards with them, with the permission from the forest department. Right. And there are also dangers of the pirates who are very, very notorious from the Sundarban region. So there are many different issues for different terrains.
Oh, good. I see, Anana. So yeah, we don't always have to worry about pirates in field work, but that's quite impressive. We are getting actually a bit past the time of the schedule that I was given. I wonder if I could just before I close this session, take the sort of the prerogative of the commentator to say I absolutely in favor of high-tech methods and all of that, but it's also, I mean, I think there are free things that we could do to improve our understanding, and one of those is to gather and organize the data that we have. I mean, we know about archaeological sites all over the place. We don't have a central database. We tend not to share information. I would say it's part of a project. We're working on a paper now that's aggregating and synthesizing land use data for South Asia at 12,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, and 4,000 years ago. You know, it's just completely scattered. You know, so there's more than 100 years of archaeological research, but unlike scholars in paleoecology or other disciplines, archaeologists are, you know, don't really have a tradition of data sharing or of even, you know, sometimes even publishing our material. So I would just, you know, send out a little, you know, plea that if we have, you know, these sites, for example, in the Sundarbans that have been, you know, sort of fortuitously discovered, I mean, at least let's know where they are. Let's, you know, get that location and whatever descriptive information we have out and available. That's already a beginning, you know. So even before we do LiDAR and other expensive fancy things, we can work with what we have and make the best of it, because I think that we have a huge amount of information already, and a lot of it really just needs to be put out there. So that's my little plea. I thank both of the speakers today for that really outstanding paper, really so much to think with and so much interesting results. I will bow to the organizers now to see if I'm allowed to. I think we're going to say goodbye.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
It's more than 3 hours, I think.
Yeah, we've taken a bit of time, and it's still yeah, it's almost lunchtime here. So I will go get something to eat now.
And it's dinner time for us.
Okay. Kathleen, would you permit the host to conclude the session and just express her vote of thanks, I think.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Shadhin Sen, AKM Syfur Rahman, for your wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Kathleen D. Morrison, for your wonderful moderation and discussion I ever listened. And thanks to all the participants, all the attendees, all the discussions today, those who are with us till now. And I forget to mention one moderator and discussion name of 18th June. He is Dr. Andrew Bauer, Associate Professor, Department of Anthropology, Stanford University, USA. So this was from my end. Thank you so much from the Regional Directorate Office, Department of Archaeology, Khulna and Barishal Division. This is the southern part Delta area of Bengal. So hope in future all of you will be with us with all of your technologies, all of your indigenous knowledge, all of your sharings. We will be connected together. We will work for the ecology, anthropology, archaeology, as well as cultural heritage and ecology of the region of the earth. Let's hope for we can come out from the COVID-19 situation so that we can do more field work. We can have a connectivity, more connectivity with each other in the field, not through the webinar and training session. Hope everybody will come to Bangladesh. I welcome on behalf of Department of Archaeology and Regional Directorate of Khulna. Please do come to see the Deltic ecology and archaeology so that we can thought of doing something new, doing something else from coming out of the box. So thank you so much. I'm really feeling very bad because the 17 days journey with you is almost end, but thank you so much. Have a good day. Good day and good night, those who are from Bangladesh and India for them. And please have your lunch, Dr. Kathleen. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Start